Hey guys, thanks for stopping by. Today we're gonna talk about EVs or electric vehicles and why, in my opinion, throughout this entire video will be my opinion alone based on my observation, why EVs are not ready for mass adoption. They are a beautiful concept and they are a really beautiful technology. I'm not gonna lie about that. I like them. They are amazing cars and some people say they're saving tons of money. But there's one problem of many. Those EVs are not ready and will not be ready for mass adoption for one reason to begin with. The technology on them is not reliable yet. We are far from ready with the lithium batteries as they stand right now to be produced and used sustainably. What I mean by that? By saying that buying a EV, you are saving the planet and you're changing this and that. You know, you're patting yourself in the back and you are completely neglecting the reality of how those batteries come to be. Sustainability with lithium batteries couldn't be further from the truth. It is not sustainable, it is not clean, and it is not easy or cheap to produce by any means. The cobalt, lithium, and all the mining that goes with them is nearly impossible to do a carbon zero emission or whatever you want to call it in this environment. It has to be extracted from underground, just like gasoline and oil and all that other stuff. Not to forget that I am not aware of any EVs being made with thin air. By that I mean the chassis, the body, the glass, the chips, and all that stuff is not something that comes out of thin air. They all have to be mined. They all have to be produced. Okay, let me give you the benefit of the doubt that some of them are made with recycled metals and recycled plastic and all that beautiful fancy wording that we hear every day. But that is not true all the time. Actually, most of the time, most of those vehicles have next to nothing recycled on them. Because recycling materials, ask anybody that is in the industry, we know is not cheap, and it's not easy, and it's not clean. There's no clean way to melt metal back in the foundries to make it viable for reproduction without creating some smoke or the so-called, a beautiful word now, CO2, which is not always true. It's not only CO2 alone that's damaging and problematic for the environment. And no, just to let you know, I'm not an environmentalist or a specialist on that field. But what I mean with that is that there's no way to produce any EV without causing some carbon emissions, and I'm talking about quite a lot of them. So the production part of it, I'm talking about before you step foot on the pedal to drive it, causes the exact amount of emissions that a normal gas-powered vehicle takes to be produced, first of all. Second, batteries inside. Now you're adding another layer that I would parallel that with drilling oil. You are mining instead of drilling. But most people tend to forget that part, that mining actually destroys the ecosystem more than drilling for oil. Drilling oil, you are not talking about a big hole that it can fit an entire city on it. Meanwhile, to extract lithium and cobalt, you need holes that you can fit a city, which is quite damaging to the areas. Mostly are happening in Africa, in Asia, and I heard in some areas in India, but if you guys are aware of that part in India, please let me know in the comments below. So far, only resources or sourcing the materials to make those cars is no different than sourcing material to make gas-powered cars. That is one side of the problem, which makes EVs equal, if not worse, than the gas-powered cars or conventional vehicles. Now, the second part of the problem is reliability. EVs, we all know, are the most not reliable vehicle so far in the vehicle world. And for all of you that are thinking that EVs are a new thing, that is absolutely not true. In the early 1900s, actually battery-operated and battery-run cars were a thing. That's how long ago battery cars have been started to be tested. And now, the only thing that has changed, besides the shapes and the PR tactics used to sell EVs, is that battery technology itself has improved to some point. Only to some point, but absolutely by no means to be reliable. Lithium ion or lithium phosphate or whichever lithium combination you would like to take is as good as a backup. But if you deal with electronics and you're an electrician or any kind of engineer or a technician, you know very well what the enemy of a battery is. A lot of people would say temperatures, whether freezing or melting or all that. No. The main enemy of batteries are motors. Motors, yes. Those things that have a stator, a rotor, that kind of motor is the enemy of batteries. And that is, to be fair, the enemy of almost all electricity when it comes to consumption and amperage draw. So every EV is comprised of from 1 up to 4 motors. Now you're putting so much stress in that battery that the battery is starting a stressful day from the time you actually move that vehicle. Because now you're turning electric energy into mechanical energy. And those batteries will overheat, will get damaged without reaching 150 to 200,000 miles. And so far, there is not many EVs that have reached 200,000 miles. This is why it is extremely early and very wrong for any of us to make claims blindfolded about EVs, to say that they are very good and we are doing this and that. No, they're not. Now take in the other hand, just think of logistics. We don't have a technology to actually recharge those batteries fast enough. So a trip that would take you usually 7 hours, you have to bet that it will take you at least 8 to 10 hours. Are you willing to sacrifice that much time for a PR stunt that you are saving the planet? Because you are not actually saving the planet. And there is no battery on planet Earth that functions without evaporative gases. Every single lithium battery, if there is not a sort of evaporation on it or air circulation throughout it, it will not work. It will overheat and most likely explode. Check any lithium battery you have around your house. In one way or another, there is an air leak on it. I would call it in layman's terms. They must have an air leak in order to function. It's just, that's how it works. And now you are producing some sort of emissions in your EV. The other hand is, you cannot exactly charge an EV with solar unless you are willing to spend $200,000-$300,000 in a really good solar system at your house to charge it. And of course, you have to wait to finish charging it. And let's put that aside. Let's say you have all the time in the world that you can charge it the entire night. So that means you paid $100,000 to buy the car. You paid $200,000 to build the solar system to charge that EV and, of course, to have your house plugged on it. That means you're rich. On the other hand, that means you are not doing it exactly to save anybody. You're simply doing it because you can and because you can afford it. And if you have incentives now to force others to buy your car, of course you will say anything it takes to sell that EV. If you remember, not long ago we were told that phones were completely sealed shut and unrepairable because how dangerous lithium batteries are inside them. Well, now just imagine yourself driving on a car that has at least 2,000 times the amount of lithium that your phone has. And while driving that car, you are on top of it. Now just imagine that for a moment and sleep with it. Not to forget that majority of the people are not going to charge those vehicles on a solar system or a wind system or any kind of those so-called wrongfully self-sustainable system. There's no such thing as 100% self-sustainable. It's a myth. If anybody can prove me wrong, I welcome you all, because I have arguments for all of it. Because I've ran all my mental calculations about self-sustainability, and the furthest I went was maybe a backup, but not sustainable. So, that vehicle that you're charging at that fast station, whether it be Tesla or the other ones that are coming with daily now, where is that electricity coming from, do you think? Coal, fuels, which are not fossil, by the way. That is quite a lie, and it's very intellectually offensive to an engineer or to a technician to call gasoline and oil and all that fossil fuels. It's intellectually deprived as a notion. You should never use that because it's not true. It doesn't come from fossils if you ever study that, but I'm not gonna go in much details. I'm not the proper person to talk about it, and I don't want to bore you too much with that aspect. But you have books and you have places that you can learn about it, and you will know that I'm actually telling you the truth and I'm not lying about it. But we now established something, that those batteries are being charged with the same electricity that you are saying is destroying the planet. The same power plants that are coming through poles to your house now are charging your car. Beautiful so far, right? The problem is that people insist on the durability, repairability of these cars that we don't know too much about yet, because it's a fairly new thing in the masses. Besides, as I said, in the early 1900s, yes, there were attempts to run a car on batteries, and yeah, it went maybe 14 to 20 miles. And by comparison with gasoline cars, even the EVs of today are not going much further. But EVs are not easier to repair than gasoline cars, because in a gas car, most of what you have to do includes wrenches, includes maybe a few heavy tools, but you don't need to be a complete electro engineer or an electromechanical engineer to repair a simple thing in your car. To clean your mass airflow sensor, clean contacts, check if your injectors are clean, check if your engine is running properly, and go to a mechanic for maybe $100, $200 and repair it. Versus going to the dealer, the only option on EVs is a few $1,000s most of the time. And yes, we know the infamous case of that Tesla that really all it needed was less than $20 part to be repaired, but the dealer said it needs $20,000 to be repaired. Because of course it's a monopoly right now. Not a lot of people are well informed of the EVs, and not a lot of people know much about EVs to repair them themselves. And yes, you might say, but why? What's wrong with going every time to the dealer? Well, I mean, if you're rich, that's fine. You can have your chauffeur and your butlers do that for you. But for the rest of us that don't have a personal chauffeur and don't have personal butlers, we have to deal with reality. We have to actually pull a wallet out of our pocket and pay for stuff, and if they don't give us a courtesy car, we might have to just wait at the dealer until the car is fixed. And I'm talking about for the majority of the planet that some people tend to say that they care so much. But if you don't care about the people on that planet, I'm not sure why you care for anything on that planet. That is just my opinion. And the last point I want to drive home with the EVs and why they are not ready for mass adoption is the risk factor. Now, a lot of people are saying that, oh, but there are tests that in crashes they're safer and all that. Have you checked what the fire engineers are saying about EVs? And have you ever tested with a lithium battery on your own to puncture it? And have you tried to shut that fire off with anything, including fire blanket, fire extinguishers, water, and whatnot? It doesn't go down. There is not one single way yet, at least to our knowledge, how to shut off a fire on a lithium battery bank. And with cars, you're not dealing with lithium in the amounts of a phone. A phone can catch fire, you take it out of the pocket, maybe it burns your finger a little bit, and you toss it away. But with a car, you don't get to toss it away. A car, heaven forbid, will take lives because it's impossible to contain the fire properly. And no, the whole thing that somehow they're safer in crashes, that is absolutely not true. Take any, for example, let's say a 95 D240 Mercedes. Have you ever seen the crash tests of those things? That thing, you can crash that with a mountain, and I would feel bad for the mountain. Just because some of the newer gas-powered cars are made out of paper, it doesn't mean that gas cars have not been and cannot be crash safe. But now, as always, of course, it's easy to complain and offer no options or solutions. My option or solution would be hybrids. So as you see, I'm not extremely against batteries, obviously, because I work with electricity and electronics for a living. So if I said I'm against batteries, that would make me the biggest hypocrite on planet Earth. And I'm not. So far, with the technology we have at hand, gas or battery, I would say that the best solution would be a well-built vehicle comprised of a small, probably 1.8 to 2.2 liter gas engine and a nice, sizable battery-powered engine with a decent battery bank, but not too big. And how I would do that would be very simple. I would separate the motors. So the diesel engine would go on the front, absolutely on the front. There's no chance batteries to stay on the front because of safety reasons. Now that engine would be direct drive, or what would be in the mechanical world on the front wheel drive, that the motor will go directly to the transmission and transmission be right under the motor and power on those two wheels with gas when needed. And the electric motors on the other side would be two individual electric motors directly to the wheel on the back, connected to the power bank that makes 3/4 of the vehicle. So instead of extending the battery bank as most EVs have up to the front, I would go from the driver's seat up to the almost back tail with a battery bank in 2 rows, not a single row. So that would provide more than enough power for both. Put a nice gas tank and have that vehicle, both combined, battery and electricity, reach at least 500 to 600 miles range. And now that is what I would call a great car that if I had the money, I would buy tomorrow. But so far, every company somehow is tangled on reducing the weight of the car, reducing the materials of the car and all that. But how about thinking of the engineering part of the car? I always thought in my entire life that engineering meant more than anything in a car, but today, no, design. Design matters most. Yes, I'm not saying that design doesn't matter. Cars are beautiful, aerodynamically and otherwise, but you have to have the mechanics of it working properly and in tandem with each other to make sense to the end user. But making a car that reaches 600 miles would mean that a lot of companies would have to fight for it, and they're not willing to do that. So probably even the engineers who think about it are stepping back a little bit on their train of thought, just for the fact that the world is, kind of led by 2, 3, 4 companies in total. And I'm not gonna get into thinking like a conspiracy guy because I don't have a conspiracy hat on me, so I'm unprotected. But I would definitely say that EVs are far away from mass adoption. I wouldn't mind having an EV to test with and toy with, but for example, for some of the trips I might take, an EV would be far from the needs I have for it. Let's say I want to drive 10 hours, which happens a lot, to another state, and there's time limits of at what time do I have to be at that state and at what time do I have to come back. Now with an EV, that 10-hour stretch becomes 15 to 18 hours stretch if the car makes it. And as you see, that makes it not just inconvenient, but extremely undoable for me. I lose business, I can lose clients, I can lose livelihood because I wanted the fancy car. And no, as you see, I'm not touching too much on the front of PR that you are saving the planet. As I said before, you gotta sleep in a different pillow. It might be the wrong pillow you're sleeping if you think that by buying an EV you're saving anything or anyone, except for the big corporation that sold you that car. That's probably who you're saving. And for the rest of the civilians, I say EVs are great as long as you can afford it and as long as you have too much time in your hands while you're driving and you don't have anywhere to be on time. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you had fun. And all the opinions on this video are mine and mine alone. And most of those opinions might or may not be sarcasm. So take it with a grain of salt and don't take it too hard. And if you think that I'm very wrong, just think of sarcasm then, I guess. We'll see you next time. Please like and subscribe. Bye!